3, 2. Greetings and welcome to the Liberalist live stream number 3, where we try to tackle SJW madness from around the globe and keep a straight face and our, sanity. Meeting us here today in the digital studio is Matt from our Facebook, Jordan from the Liberalist Discord, Mark from the UK Facebook group, Mary also from our Facebook, and I'm Dan Werner. So, how you guys doing?
I'm doing fine.
Oh, good, thanks.
So, we have some issues that we're going to have to take on. So, for everyone's pleasure, here we have it. Formula One. This is from Australia.
I remember this.
Yep. Formula One acts as grid girls starting at the Grand Prix in March in Australia. Apparently, the F1 girls have been protesting and all of that good stuff. So, who would like to take this one on?
Where do you even start with this crap? Oh man, wasn't there like an interview I saw somewhere that was one of the grid girls like talking to a feminist and asking them why she had to have her job axed?
It was on one of the UK news channels. I think it was Channel 4, and
of course it was.
They were basically having a go, saying, "You're objectifying yourself for the pleasure of men," and it's like, yeah, but we're choosing to do it.
Right. Why are you getting?
I saw that too.
I couldn't find it. I did actually go looking for it. That's unfortunate.
Where's the thing? I call it the Women's March to the Unemployment Line. I mean, are they just going to eventually try to banish modeling itself? I mean,
at some point.
It's sort of, if they have that talent that they want to use, and looks are a talent because they take upkeep and work, like, then why be so authoritarian about it? I mean, they sort of showed their stripes, the feminist movement, doing this.
I mean, it's
the Ugly Girls Club.
It's also cutting into artistic expression, because you can argue that the modeling industry in its entirety is about artistic expression, because the outfits that you wear in the modeling world are not practical. And I mean, this is just sort of the first step into that. I mean, and for a lot of these women as well, this is either their summer job or their permanent job. And I don't know whether or not they feel objectified, but it's sort of, they play to the crowd. They're entertainers as much as they are models. So I really don't see. Sorry, go on, Mary.
Oh, they're not being forced to do it, so I don't know why it would be anyone else's, job to choose how they live their lives.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'd say also it kind of fits in with the whole marriage of Islamists and feminism, in that they want women to cover up. If you look at the screen now, you'll see the Rebecca Cooper, one of the grid girls, who has been called scantily clad furniture, displaying some of the outfits she wore, and they made a point to say that they choose which outfits to wear. They never wear something against their will. So do feminists just want women to cover up for their protection?
I would even frame it as a feminist phenomenon. It's like a choice feminist phenomenon, because these women, they choose what they want to do and they do it. They are free to do it. So I would say that it's a kind of feminist phenomenon.
Right. This is Theo joining us from the Facebook. He's also known as the statistics man.
Oh, he's the guy you've been talking about. All right.
Yeah.
And saying all bad things.
I mean, these women tend to be quite socially switched on. They're interested in themselves. They do all their research. They're the kinds of people who get followed online, and they get by via their looks. And there's nothing that shouldn't say. There's nothing that should say, I should say, that they can't do that because it's a free market.
Right.
Right. Well, if you look
how long Instagram is going to stand with this sort of thing.
I mean, what's the difference? If the women don't conform to typical beauty stereotypes, it's empowering. But as soon as they are considered beautiful by the majority, they're oppressing them.
Well, considered beautiful by men. I think that's really what the issue becomes.
I don't even think it's by men, because a lot of women consider these to be role models in terms of beauty standards.
That's true, but I don't think I've heard anyone. I don't think you're going to have the queer lesbian feminist complaining that a bunch of girls are looking hot until some guys come in and start wolf whistling.
Well, that's a different kind of behavior altogether. But the thing that they're policing right here is these girls' ability to choose to wave a flag, which is not an oppressive motion, unless it's, you know, we could get into that another time.
Right.
But, you know, there's nothing inherently sexist about the job.
No.
Either. It's not even like, I mean, as much as people can have different moral standpoints on things like strip clubs, this isn't even like, it's so vanilla compared to even that.
Yeah, I'm going to take a moral stand on strip clubs. They are morally good and should remain where they are.
If you invade the Middle East with strip clubs and porno.
Yeah, you probably fix it. Right. This is such an uncontroversial issue, right? Like being upset that these women are choosing to go out on these racetracks and wave flags. I really don't see where the major like point of disconnect is on this. Like, I really truly don't.
Yeah, well, the way I see it is, if you look at the people, the men competing, they're judged in a very superficial way, much like the women are judged on their looks. Men in the sport are judged based on their success. And if they're not successful, you're going to rip on them. Imagine a footballer or a baseball player or what have you, and they do a poor job. You're not going to sit there, and a fan won't sit there and worry about their feelings.
I mean, you're also looking at, I mean, just going back to the beauty standard, most of these sports people are judged on a beauty standard. I mean, men and women. And it's like, I mean, David Beckham has built a modeling career around, you know, sort of objectifying himself for women. I mean, you can look at basically any sort of pop star and that sort of thing, and the way that they dress and why they dress that way. And a lot of it, sex sells and sex appeal sells. And I just don't understand why this is so controversial to the radical movements.
Right. Well, meanwhile, you have young women getting their genitals mutilated.
Exactly.
Well,
that's an actual.
I would say I have some idea about why they find this controversial. It's to me the fundamental issue is agency. They believe that people don't have agency. And therefore, they believe that if women see that, then they will submit themselves to unreasonable standards. They just put aside any agency on the part of women, I would say.
Well, like, your job is empowerment, I believe.
I mean, I think I can actually explain this from an empowerment perspective, because I used to follow a lot of feminists back when I was about 4 or 5 years ago. It seems like it's sort of the internalized misogyny argument, like broken out a little bit, where they say, okay, so these women are choosing to do this. Would they have chosen to do this had they not been, you know, influenced earlier in their lives? I think the feminists are taking the perspective of the only reason they are choosing this is because they've been brainwashed into believing this is acceptable, similar to how the Islamist, or how we might say a Muslim woman is only choosing to wear a burqa because her family forced her to wear it for so long. It's almost like a Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, it's the agency problem. It's basically the agency problem.
Mary, you're going to say something?
I said the Iranian women are trying to take their hijabs off, so that sort of negates that theory, I believe.
I mean,
well, I think they're mostly talking about like Muslim women in the West, because it's very common actually nowadays. The burqas, or not the burqa, that's a different thing. The hijab, yeah, exactly. The hijab,
I think it's
pretty popular in the United States among Muslim women.
I mean, I think it's a fundamental sort of fallacy to take agency away from women in having control in some of these states. I mean, the primary role of women in, for instance, Islamic countries is education. They raise the children. And many of them believe this as fervently as the men. I mean, if you could argue that women are brainwashed by the ideology, you could also argue that men are.
Yeah, that's true.
So I mean, in regards to this, they're acting like these women were coerced into the job. I mean, I don't think so. Genuinely, the statistics do not back that up.
I don't either, but I'm just
hello, gentlemen.
From that perspective.
Hello,
how you doing?
Joining us is the alt-centrist, Mr. Jonathan Wong. How you doing?
Oh, very well, very good, thank you.
I wanted to ask Mary. You've
just doxed me, thank you.
Good. That's what I'm gonna do.
Just start with the docs.
Right. I'd like to ask Mary. You see these outfits, and as a woman, seeing as we all know that women are all the same, so you share the same opinions. So you're going to speak.
Obviously. You're
going to speak for an entire gender. How do you feel about these outfits that we're seeing on the screen?
I don't see anything wrong with them. I mean, they look fairly modest to me, and even if they weren't, no one is forcing them to wear them. So that would be my, I might not choose to wear it myself, but I certainly have no problem with anyone else wearing them.
Hashtag free the nipple.
Did you guys see there was a racing driver that's a woman that that actually spoke out against a ban? Actually, have you seen
Yeah,
that?
I did see that actually.
Yeah,
It's a
that
really
is
good video.
that she was spot on actually, that one, because she does car reviews as well before she was a racing driver, and I've actually been watching her for years, like since she was working with Car Buyer. Let me quickly find her name. You guys keep talking on.
Yeah, sure. So alt-centrist. So when you say alt-centrist, are we talking like Hitler alt-centrist or Stalin alt-centrist?
Above Hitler.
Above? Oh, wow.
Alternative to Hitler.
Holy
The
shit.
Grand Führer?
Altführer.
Grand Altführer.
Dude, Altführer would actually make a great YouTube name.
That's a good point about
It's a bit too memey for me.
that's a good point about the women driver standing up against the ban. A lot of these women have claimed that because of their work on the grid, they've gotten to know more about cars and the sport itself and have become big fans of that. So essentially what this feminist group has done is limit women's access to a sport that is pretty much dominated by men.
Right.
It's limiting the choices, because it's, feminism used to be about freedom of women to choose what they wish to pursue, no matter what the cost is, at their own expense. The freedom to do so was one of the thing that, like, let us go out at night, let us chance it. That was what they were going on about.
There's also the problem with the fact that there is a cost associated with every single career that you make. It's like if you choose a career that's going to be part-time, the cost is going to be financial. If you choose a career like engineering, and high-level engineering at that, where it's sort of 80 hours a week, it's going to be a cost to your free time. And the feminists don't seem to want to click with the idea that every single job comes with a cost.
Right. It's it's a paradox inherent in all identity movements, is they claim, for the people they claim to empower, first those people must admit they are inherently weak.
Yeah,
Right.
I've sent you the link on Messenger. Her name was Rebecca Jackson. Yeah.
That was it, yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
So first you have to admit that you are a victim, and then they'll empower you. It's a pure paradox.
Well, it's religious at that point. Like that particular message is like very, very common across world religions.
It's essentially, I don't like what you're doing, therefore I want to get you banned from having the freedom to do so, under the guise that it's beneficial to women, even though you are a woman.
It's interesting that someone else brought up the idea that it was making it even less female accessible by getting them out of F1 grid girls in the first place. It seems like the feminists don't mind certain things being male dominated if they don't care about it. Like construction, they don't give a shit.
Or workplace deaths.
Workplace deaths, they don't give it. Well, wouldn't want more workplace deaths anyway, so they can. I'm okay with them not caring about increasing that on their side. But I mean, there's certain areas where they're kind of okay with it being male territory, as long as we don't say it's male territory. But I don't know. It's just strange to me that like you guys were saying, the whole choice thing doesn't seem to quite jive with that.
But guys, do you see this picture here? It looks like the Spice Girls are defending the grid girls.
Holy shit! Go Spice Girls!
If we're on the side of the Spice Girls,
come on.
If you're on the side of the Spice Girls, you know you're doing something right.
Yeah.
They're still looking pretty good, all things considered.
Right. I think Baby Spice looks better. She's on the right there.
Really, the one on the left is the one I'm liking, but whatever.
She fixed her teeth.
I'm sorry, we're objectifying the Spice Girls.
Anyway, back on topic.
Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, these women go on, they get access to the tech industry in particular as well. Like, it's a side route in the same way. I mean, I used to work with aviation, and you could see air traffic control and sort of air stewarding as side routes into the business. Like, this is no different to air stewarding in terms of that it's connected but not directly connected to the engineering and the aerospace role. So it's another side route that they want to close off. I don't understand that.
Right.
Dan, Brandon would like to join the stream. Shall I send him the link?
I'll go right ahead.
Right, one moment. You guys continue.
And joining us now is hardcore Mr. Carlos. How you doing?
Right, buddy.
You're gonna have to speak up a bit.
What up, buddy?
By the way, I have to mute you because your phone's got bad background noise. Remember?
Yeah.
might even kick you because you're annoying.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to our next topic. We spent a fair amount of time. Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right, so this one is worrying, to say the least. Swedish students at an engineering school are being forced to write essays on white male privilege.
I don't have any end essay.
Yeah, right. So essentially, do you think they'd even accept a dissenting opinion essay, or are they just look for one opinion?
No, they've literally got heresy laws in Sweden. You know, you'll be ostracized if you
believe in intersectionality. Of course, they're not going to be okay with dissenting opinions.
I mean, yeah, are we going to talk about Asian privilege at this stage, or the fact that Indians are the top 3% of society? I mean, there are something like 15 categories above white men.
Well,
we're
talking about Sweden, so it's primarily like these are white students. If it was the U.S., I'd say, I mean, what are the Asian students, right?
I'm talking about a European-wide study. There's sort of 10 to 15, different ethnicities that do better than white men, because white men tend to make up both top ends and also primarily the working class in those countries. So it's quite like a bimodal distribution.
Yeah. So part of this course that the engineering students take, they're forced to take what is called program cohesion, including a seminar and an essay on minorities and equal treatment. To participate in the seminars, the students have to watch a film about being black in the Nordic country. Now, here's my issue with it, and I'm sure you'll agree. Essentially, they're saying that if you're black, you have one experience.
Yeah.
Despite your individuality.
An anecdotal experience is not representative.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
I'm going to interject here real quick. And one of the most frustrating things that I find about the alt-right and the progressives, they're both on the same page on this stuff, is the fact that they think that you can have an entirely different lived experience than the people you grew up around you because you're black or Mexican or whatever. I literally grew up with only white people. My lived experience is very, very similar to all of those white people. And I don't understand how it is that somebody could come along and be like, well, you're a Mexican. Your lived experience is that of a Mexican. Bitch, I've never even been to Mexico. How is it that you sit here and pretend like this guy and whatever? I mean, if you're sitting here, you're talking about some refugee who came to the country and it refuses to adapt. Yeah, he's going to have a completely different lived experience than those of the country. But if you're talking like a person who was born there, who had the schooling and grew up, you know, as a whatever Swedish or whatever person, they're not going to have that much fundamentally different experience than that of the normal Norwegians or Swedish people or wherever.
Right.
It's stupid.
Yeah, so essentially we're going to stick to talking about the side that has actual cultural sway and relevancy, which will be the left, but I totally agree with your point. Here's the thing, though. How do you argue against white privilege? Because if you're like me,
you know how I argue against white privilege?
Well, I'm going to set this up first. So essentially, if you're part of the majority population in any country, you're going to have privileges over that of another. My argument against it is that human beings are so multifaceted that to reduce them down to one or two aspects of their identity is extremely low definition.
Well, I mean, most of the problem with the idea of white privilege is that it's kind of focusing on the wrong problem in the first place. I do agree that if you go to somewhere like, say, China, right? If you're a Chinese person, you're probably going to have a better experience than if you're a white person. But that's not a case of Chinese privilege. That's the case of where you go to any country in the world, if you're not part of the mainstay culture, well, you don't get the majority privilege, if you will, right? So I think they're just focusing on this inappropriately in a racial way, when it's just a phenomenon that you see in any country, where if you're part of the culture that's already there, you're going to do better than if you're not.
I think a part of this is really driven across from America, where there's really seem to be different cultures associated with race. I mean, I think that's mainly due to class divide as well. Certainly in mainland Europe and the UK, culturally, it's not seen as a thing. I don't know why this has come up in Sweden. I mean, they claim to be the most, like all the Nordic and Scandinavian type countries claim to have this sort of monopoly on equality at the moment. And they're noticing that it's just not going the way they are. I think this is grasping at straws when they've noticed that despite all the legislation that they've put in place to sort of make it so that equality of outcome is going to happen, and it hasn't happened because men and women have naturally sorted themselves into their own categories because of freedom of choice.
Yeah, that's called a Nordic gender equality paradox. That's actually a more recent study that looks at more countries than that and look at the apparent oppression of women versus the distribution representative of women in different fields. They find an inverse correlation between the gender equality and how much women are in STEM, for example. Let me see if I can pull that up. You guys keep talking.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm referencing. And this just screams to me, because it's coming from one of those countries that it's like the men and the women have naturally, due to freedom of choice and lack of oppression, sorted themselves into this way of working, and it is working, but there must still be something wrong. And so the only way we can attribute it to is the white male patriarchy. So let's make them more aware of the white male patriarchy by making them write this essay, and maybe it'll go somewhere.
So one of the things that I find really frustrating about the idea of about white privilege is the idea that privilege can be associated with the color of your skin. I mean, when I grew up in Rocket, Texas, which none of y'all know where that is, but there's a creek that runs through Rocket, Texas, and across the creek there were people who didn't have floors in their house.
Mm-hmm.
They had dirt floors, and they worked for us. They were, I mean, my parents were white and everything, but they worked for us. So inherently, whatever white privilege is, I have it as a brown person. And those people who were across the creek, you know, like there was the daughter there. She started getting molested when she was like 9. She was full on being pimped out by the time she was like 15 years old. Explain to me what the fuck white privilege is whenever that girl has literally spent her entire life at the bottom and has no chance of ever being up.
Who's making that background noise?
Don't do that.
You're coming from the point of view there that that white privilege is like whiteness is a cultural thing. It's like cultural whiteness as opposed to an actual skin tone.
I'm saying that whiteness isn't a cultural thing. I'm saying that whiteness is a skin tone, and it's moronic to say that whiteness is that the color of your skin naturally gives you privilege over people around you, because there was no amount of whiteness that would have made them people not end up meth heads.
Right. Well, here's the thing, though. When you are of the majority in any country, it's absolutely correct to say that you will have a step up over those who are not. But here's the deal. Humans are so multifaceted. Like, consider a jar. An empty jar is the human, and you fill it with marbles. Each marble is a different facet of the human being. No matter how much white skin you have in America, it will not cover up for a low IQ, a low work ethic, impulsive, violent behavior, or any other facets. Like, you can be born mentally challenged, and well, there goes. Like, no amount of whiteness will stop you from being mentally challenged.
Yeah,
it's true.
And also, I think that this is really important to point out as far as things like this, is because every single person who's affected by those kind of tests and those kind of propaganda and all those other stuff, those are people who either A, are going to end up over here, or they're going to end up over at the alt-right. And they really don't have any choice because the mainstream doesn't want them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's right. The working class whites are just left out, and they're told that they have privilege when they're struggling to survive. And I think that's what's driven a lot of them towards Trump.
Well, I don't agree with that at all. But I think that it's brought a lot of them towards identitarianism. Going towards Trump isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's the idea that you're going to play the social justice game, but you're just going to play the white card instead of, the black card or the brown card or the gay card or whatever.
Yeah, but they have no cultural sway, so it doesn't matter. John sent me the link to the gender equality paradox here. It's a new study explores a strange paradox. In countries that empower women, they are less likely to choose math and science professions. What would you guys have to say about that? How about Brendan? You're new here. Brendan is from our Facebook. How you doing, Brendan?
I'm doing good, unless there's another Brendan. I'd say it makes sense. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to work.
Have a quick read on a study. Actually, he actually tried to explain why as well. Have a quick read. Links in the chat.
If you it's on the screen for you now. So.
Okay. I say I'll quickly say my piece and then you can just jump in. I'd say it makes sense that when there are no barriers preventing people from doing what they want to do, then any natural inclination which we will have to do a certain thing will just take priority.
Yeah, I agree.
Personally, I think it's ridiculous to assume, given that our chemical makeup is so different, to assume that there are going to be manifestations other than the physical that are differences between men and women. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as no sort of societal systemic oppression can be identified, because that's the key, is that they're now turning to implicit bias because they can't come up with any any kind of actually opaque bias. As long as you can't identify an actual method of racism or sexism or whatever, then it doesn't matter what people choose. I mean, the only issue happens is when you go, well, we don't have enough engineers. Well, we need more engineers. We don't need more women in engineering. We just need more engineers. I think that it can be difficult for women who go into male-dominated fields because they can feel alienated a little bit by the fact that they can't. That gender is a really obvious point of similarity between co-workers, but I don't think that that's what's driving women out of STEM.
Here's the deal. I like the fact that, like the James Damore memo, it's important to note that women and boys, girls and boys in school test around about the same for these science and math. So it's not a matter of them not being good at it. They just choose.
No, not at all.
They don't want to do that.
It's
in general.
And speaking of the Damore memo, it's like if we want more women in certain fields, or we want better representation for whatever reason, the easiest thing to do is tailor the way that you market those jobs to women. I mean,
not even sure be the marketing, because
right,
I know
not even the marketing. You tailor the job as in towards the interests of the demographic. Statistically, on a statistical average, admitting that not all women are like that, but on a statistical average, more women are like that, and so you're more likely to attract them.
Yeah, you have to change the entire makeup of the job
in the evolutionary science perspective, gender is very strongly bimodal, although it is on a spectrum, but there's a very two distinct peaks basically on the distribution. It's very strongly bimodal. So obviously there are people who are like female who are masculine, and there are men who are feminine, but it's very strongly bimodal. So it's not as say like, you know, the SJW would say is like could be anywhere along the dot. Well, the distribution is very clear.
Right, Mary, we're talking about women again, seeing as you're our representative for all women.
the token lady of the house.
What do you think?
Go diversity, hire, go.
Go diversity. Well, I am in computer science and know women in engineering, and I don't know any of them who've really complained about, problems with their male coworkers any more than you would with, anyone might complain about their coworkers. So I'm not sure.
Let me ask you a question. Do you? In my opinion, a lot of this stuff is the idea that you can kind of filibuster your way into higher positions, kind of like what happened with the BBC with those women who were like, well, we're not getting paid as much as the male co-presenters, but the male co-presenters were on like 6 days a week and, you know, brought in a lot more stuff and stuff like that. Would you find it kind of insulting that if somebody who was under you used their whatever discrimination or just used the current climate in order to get a job above you?
Well, I think that would be insulting.
Be frustrating.
And I guess I do agree. Yeah, frustrating, but I agree that maybe women are less inclined to be assertive and go and tell the boss, "Hey, pay me more, or I'm out of here." Or maybe they just choose to. I know I choose to not ask for more pay because I prefer working fewer hours. So, you know, it's as someone said earlier, it's always a trade-off.
Well, that's
The career women that I know, the ones who do the best are the most disagreeable. The ones who want to do the best have taken additional disagreeableness training. So it's just because that's what works in a professional environment. The things that set you apart, the things you disagree on and have better solutions to, are the things that will propel you through your career.
Right.
Very JBP answer.
I also
Theo, you're a statistical guy. I mean, I've assumed you've seen these statistics. I mean, what do they show you?
Yeah, Theo.
Me? Yes, I know those statistics by heart, and I would say that all the talking points that you evocated for me are quite clear, and actually I have nothing to add on this, because I think that this is robust studies. I saw many of these kind of studies that shows that the gender gap in tech or in related domains or in care-taking domains increases with development in different countries. So to me, it's basically robust science. I don't see anything to say about that.
All right, Carlos, you had something to say?
I think this falls along the same lines as the Grid Girls that I guess y'all were talking about before I got here. I think that it falls back to a group of bitter, angry, unsuccessful women who have a really good concept of the current political climate and how to work it. And what they're doing is, instead of actually promulgating their ideas that all women have the right to do whatever they want to, they're saying that you must fall into our definition of what a woman is. And if you don't, if you're using anything other than bitterness and anger to get yourself forward in life, then you're a part of the problem. You're just propagating the patriarchy and all this other stuff. And it's
right.
Can I just point something out?
May I add something? I read some stuff about why many feminists would refuse to acknowledge such data. And one thing that appeared to me when I debated with some SJW was that they take an anti-positivist position. Which means that they consider that these data are collected by people who have power, and therefore they are partial data. So yes, that's really that's their position. I think that's the best Iron Man you can do about that.
Well, it seems interesting to me that another thing to point out about what Carlos, I believe his name is, what he was saying is that it seems like everything that they want women to become is a caricature of what they call a toxic male. It's by their own definition that they're acting like the worst form of what they think men are.
Well said.
Very strange.
So to go back to the original topic with the Swedish thing, if you look at this, it says a translation from the learning material is, based on the learning material and the instruction, it is therefore undesirable that any scientifically minded technician digs into one of the many empirical studies that show that it is not always a self-evident advantage to belong to those groups. So to my earlier question, would they accept dissenting opinions? It's obvious no. They essentially want indoctrination.
Also, Dan, just want to jump in. Not only is it no, we do not want dissenting opinions, it is we are aware that what we're saying isn't true because there is data that goes against it.
Would you say that's even worse?
Yeah. So that they're not even ignorant; they are actively opposing reality.
Well, I mean, look at all the videos from Sargon's thing today. They're all basically the same thing. Like, we can't go to space because patriarchy.
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
Right. Well, a lot of the people that
Damon
hold
Savage
to this,
quote.
to me, it's a bit of someone else said it before. It's almost a bigotry of low expectations to assign to an entire group that, oh well, you're white, so you're gonna be successful no matter what. But if you look at America, for instance, in terms of household income, life expectancy, divorce rates, educational outcomes, Asian Americans, Indian Americans, Nigerian Americans have better outcomes than white Americans.
Do you know what they've forgotten? They've forgotten what diversity. They've forgotten every single demographic has a diversity. They've forgotten that.
They forget as well that apart from a diversity of sort of the look of a nation, you also have the diversity of intelligence. And it's just like, it's not that different races are, it's not that different ethnicities have different intelligences. It's just that you have, that if you, sorry, I'm going off. I completely lost my
every
thought.
population has diversity of IQ as well as competence level as well.
Yeah, competence is where I was going. It's like, yeah.
And also, IQ isn't necessarily a claim that you're going to be competent at your job.
Well, it is the greatest predictor of success, though. However,
oh, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying sometimes you can have someone who works extremely hard through their IQ, their lower IQ, and be able to learn the information at a slower pace and then be competent at their job.
I actually have a problem with the idea that successes should be based around money. I don't think that if you are, let's say you're a welder and you make,
I think it's a poor metric.
Let's say you're a welder and you make, enough to provide for your family. You don't make anywhere near 100,000, but let's say you make 50 to 70.
You might.
But money isn't actually a metric. It's just a currency for in order to have an exchange of any goods and services. Right. So if you get rid of it, then I'm just going to be like, here, have 3 chickens and give me that bicycle.
Hey guys, so if I jump in, because I've actually got the argument against money as a means of showing success.
We'll get to you, Brandon. But first, I'd like to point out that the currency you earn in a specific market is and should be a reflection of your productivity within that market. That's all I see currency as. So go ahead.
Exactly.
Ideally.
Let me finish what I'm saying.
I'd like to go to Brendan real quick. Go ahead.
All right, so quickly, like the argument against money being the sign that one is successful. Well, if somebody wins a lottery and they win £10 million, we do not think them as a successful person. If somebody is a head teacher and they earn £100,000, then they are a successful head teacher. If somebody is a banker and they earn £1 million a year, then they are a successful banker. Whereas if they only earn 50,000, then they are not. The success itself is based upon the possible limits of what somebody is doing. I, as someone who likes to do philosophy, chances are me being successful is maybe writing a book, at which point success is based upon the field in which you are working.
I can argue though that if
it depends, because if you
we're gonna let Mary go. She was speaking first.
I was going to say, if your family is fed and you're happy in your job and you've got what you need, then I don't know that. I think what somebody was trying to point out earlier, that making more money is a showy thing and nice, but it's not necessarily more success.
Right.
To yourself, perhaps.
Let me finish what I was saying real quick. I think that we as a society, because we're like American and all the people who are talking here as far as Western civilization, we all have areas that are successful and stuff like that. It is obviously based around currency and things like that. But in my opinion, if you are, let's say you perform a job for 70 years and you retire, you have grandkids, your grandkids love you, they come and see you every weekend. You don't have the biggest house, you never made 100,000 a year, but you were a success. And if you compare that to some dude who was a CEO who kills himself at 50 but made $100,000 a year every single year for his entire life and died a millionaire, then by y'all's account, he would be the success and not the guy who had grandkids.
Well, I think we
it's
can.
Not the single metric. It's not a single. Sorry, you talk on. There's too many of us.
No, you go ahead. You go. This is the last point we're going to move.
I mean, money is a single metric. It's not the entire metric. That's the whole point. I think. You have to balance work, like, because it's an economic metric, because you need to balance personal life as well as with work. Otherwise, either way you lose. You need to balance the two. So
Right.
I would say it's a good metric for success because there's a high correlation, but it's not that doesn't necessitate a definition of success.
But everybody,
Right,
in
so
Hollywood-
I'm
It's
gonna.
one component. It's one component of success.
Right. We're gonna move on to the next point. I
a
think.
lot of money. Everyone in Hollywood makes a lot of money, but across the board, they're all miserable. And I think that
I think everyone's miserable.
We're gonna get to Hollywood. We're
Yeah.
gonna get to Hollywood eventually. Let's move on to the next topic. Sorry, Euro guys. We're moving on to America. In Nevada, the university in Nevada is introducing a bias reporting hotline.
Oh, thought police. Here we go.
Does anyone want to call them and prank them right now? Because I have been making prank phone calls to bias reporting hotlines myself.
Ooh,
You
that's a good
guys are
idea.
literally harassing me now.
I feel harassed. I think we need to report that I'm being harassed.
We
We're
have to mutually report each other.
We're gonna
We should
figure
get-
out how to make a phone call over the stream, and then just each stream just
This is
make a prank.
mass harassment.
We should get James Damore and his army of white male conservatives to put their entire legal case through that
He's
hotline.
far right conservative.
or
Far
JDP
right.
and his army of trolls.
By
Right,
the way,
but
Dan, I
here's the
just want
thing.
to
Yeah.
compliment Dan on his getting past his hatred for JF long enough to put him on the stream and call him Theophile for some reason.
I have no hatred towards him.
I do.
Aw.
I do want to be like the words for Theophile. Like I want to sit there and write while Theophile says, and I want to say fucked up things in French.
Alright, so
Moving back to the topic.
We're gonna move back.
I am actually a bit troubled when you say Theophile because the pronunciation is Theophile, so I wasn't sure whether you were talking about pedophile, about JF, or something like that. I was like,
Oh, file.
I don't think we're going to be slinging that kind of insult around. Let's go back to the
Let's take
article
like a
question.
right turn right now.
Back to the topic.
Okay, so
to the studio.
At the Office of Equal Opportunity and the Title IX website, they have forms students can fill out, or faculty, I would guess. They're similar to the sexual assault form. I don't know why they're not encouraging their students to go to the effing police, but
Yeah.
what we have now.
That's
Title IX.
So yeah, Title IX, yeah, exactly. But so you would have someone fill out the form or call the bias reporting hotline, and then they would send out a team. Not a team with any authority, but they would come out and speak to you as a victim. So to me, I don't know if you guys
you just described the police.
right, but tell me if you agree or disagree with me here. I don't think they're really gonna be able to do anything, but they just want the appearance of doing something.
So they're going to observe and report. Okay.
disagree.
Yes.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing that happened with Title IX. You're going to have an outbreak of reports, and then inevitably somebody's going to get expelled for hate speech. It's going to happen no matter what.
It's going to be abused massively for people to target people they don't like.
Well, also, the question is, does this work both ways? If a communist starts talking about communism and I feel harassed by the fact that they want to take away my property, can I report them and will they then be punished?
No.
Oh, of course
It's
not.
worth
You know they
trying.
won't.
There we go.
Worth
That's the
trying.
answer.
You'll be told you're abusing the system.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck this.
Try that,
Seriously,
though.
what did McCarthy do? What did he do wrong? Go on, tell me.
I know. I want to have a debate about whether or not McCarthy was the bad guy.
Pinochet 2024.
Yeah, I would do that about McCarthy. Now, here's the thing. They of course go to the same excuse they always do when it comes to thought policing. They want a diverse and inclusive campus. How does that read to you, Mary? What do you think they want when they say that?
Well, they want free thought as long as it's the proper thought, it seems like. And, if there's no definition of what hate speech is, then anything can be hate speech.
I'm reminded of a clip of Big Red, the feminist,
Oh,
who
God.
went to, I think it was London Pride, maybe Brighton Pride, and she was talking to a Christian who was basically preaching on the side of the road, and he was preaching against homosexuality. Now, regardless of anyone's opinions on that, he has the right to free speech to do that and hold his opinion, and it's
you might construe that as bias, but it's not sort of, he's not discriminating against gay people by doing that. But she said, what you're doing, you have the right to do what you're doing, but what you're doing is not right. And regardless of how we all feel on that particular issue, that's the approach that they'll take, that moral grandstanding, that's right. I mean, if you saw, it was in Sargon's video on Venezuela, and Donald Trump's speech to the UN, he talks about how it's a consequence of socialism being enacted faithfully in that country that they've come to the point that they're at. And the number of people who are really hesitant to clap him in that audience is amazing, because it's just this kind of dominated thought that it could work, but it doesn't.
So strange to be nervous to clap for the president, isn't it?
Here's the thing, like this hotline, so far, according to this article, has only had one complaint in this semester.
Dan, you're inside my head. I was going to point that out. It's like, and then it says it's unclear what procedures will follow. So why did you create it? If you're not...
What this really is.
One complaint.
It's basically a communication device just to make some advertisement towards social justice oriented people, probably.
What this is.
There's a lot of avenues and resources people don't know about. Yeah, I'm sure that's it, guys. That's the problem. It's lack of exposure that's the reason you're not getting anything. That's the real issue.
Is a another attempt to expand the power that the diversity, whatever they're called, whatever thing it is,
diversity officers.
Yeah, their offices.
Diversity cabal.
To expand their power, because the problem is that whenever Betsy DeVos got rid of or rescinded Title IX, most of the
sections of it,
most of the colleges sit there and said, "We're going to keep on with Title IX. We're not going to do that." And so what the problem is that every single one of these colleges now has a diversity office that gets a certain amount of funding. And here at my school, they throw like 9 events a semester where it's just like, oh yeah, LGBT booth over here and stuff like that.
No one cares about.
Yeah, nobody. First of all, we have a really high gay population at the school, but I don't understand why they need to be treated like they're victims whenever they outnumber the amount of straight men in the school.
I mean, I think it's the paradox of like having a Black History Month as well. It's like, why can't it just be all history? And you include the important figures from all. And it's like LGBTQ awareness. It's like, well, your awareness is great, but at the same time, you're 3% of the population. You don't need this much exposure. Like, it shouldn't be a taboo to be, of any kind of sexual persuasion. But at the same time, you don't need to draw attention to it at the same time.
Right.
Actually, I do want to jump in. You should be ashamed to be a furry. I'm just going to say that now.
That is degeneracy.
Yeah. I'm looking at you, Jordan. Fucking horse for a picture.
If you get a chance on seeing how weird the is, look at the Internet Historian's video on this.
Oh, rainforest.
Yeah, rainforest. Yeah, rainforest. Yeah.
Wait, am I getting a reputation for being a furry here?
The halls, people pooping in the hall.
I'm just joking, Jordan.
Okay.
So I'd like to bring up a movie that came out in 1993, and I'm just going to urge everyone to take a look at it. Look up the trailer on YouTube and download it for free because, don't pay Hollywood any money. It's called PCU, Politically Correct University, starring David Spade, and it is quite hilarious and really, I guess the word is prescient, because it even includes the phrase "take your rape culture somewhere else," and this was back in '93. So honestly,
wow, that's quite some foresight there.
Right.
I mean,
so I want to share this quote from the article we're reading. Everybody is listening.
I was just about to bring this up. Yeah.
How creepy is that? Go ahead, Mark.
Everybody's listening. I know it doesn't answer everyone's questions and concerns, but I don't know that anything will address everything. I think it's a great first step in the right direction. I mean, if there was anything that was more vacuous and vague than that, it's like, this is the ultimate virtue signal.
Right. I mean, so we can basically all just say this is purely moral grandstanding with no real purpose.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, besides the power grab, I'm telling you, this is just a closet power grab. That's all it is. Because the second they start promoting it, which they are going to start promoting it if they only have one thing. So I would say, let's say next semester, they have a banner and all this other stuff. By the end of next semester, that thing will be fucking lit up.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we got rid of Inquisitions like so long ago.
Oh, did you see Evergreen State? It
Oh,
looked like
yeah.
it was a struggle session.
Yeah.
It was a struggle session. You know,
What was that? The R2D2 little black kid in the what is it? The motorized scooter rolling around with the damn baseball bat. Did y'all see
I
that?
thought that was funny.
No, but just the
Everything about
idea
that
of
was
that seems
fucking
ridiculous.
hilarious.
If that crowd came up to me like that, I seriously would have a hard time not actually fighting them all.
the best thing I saw.
Coming up on me like this for.
The best thing I saw was this kid walking around with chalk at Evergreen State, and he was just writing like Fred Durst did nothing wrong.
Oh no, that's
And he just wanted to show them as irrational, and they would just hate anything anyone
Dude,
did.
they followed him around. That's the exact video I'm talking about. They followed him around. It was like this wall, and he was putting Fred Durst did nothing wrong, and he had to literally walk around the wall because they were following. R2D2 was following him around with a baseball bat. And then
Was there controversy with Fred Durst?
No, he just wanted to say like, "Hey, look, they just hate everything and they're irrational." He wrote
gotcha.
like,
then when he left, and then when he left, they went and marked up his the Fred Durst part.
yeah, and then he wrote like, "Make new metal great again," and they all started freaking out. I mean, what are you going to do about these biased reporting hotlines? I called up one for New York State not too long ago, and I got the answering machine. And when it beeped, I said, "Yes, my name is Sandra Martinez. I'd like to make a complaint of racial bias." I said, "You made me select one for English. Why does it have to be number one? You are racist."
That's actually brilliant.
You haven't heard back. I can't imagine why.
So on to the next topic.
Actually, Dan, can I just jump in? Because you did ask what we would do continuing from this. I'm going to tell you what they will do.
Okay.
What they're going to do is they're going to set up the spies and the youth league, and then they're going to start sticking cameras in all of the telescreens in every single house.
Do you have your room?
Eventually, the kids will then cart their parents off to rethinking camps.
Oh yeah, straight to room 101.
Oh,
yeah.
a bit like the Red Army.
Re-education, man.
They're all gonna watch an episode of Friends, and they're gonna decide their parents are fucking wrong thinkers and send them off.
This is
exactly
like
Friends
off to the gulag.
The fact that the Friends can afford an apartment of that size is evidence of white privilege.
Yeah.
So this is essentially what we're dealing with in this culture war. I mean, they have near the far left, the authoritarian, as I call them, the authoritarians. They are essentially in hegemonic control of a lot of academia, media, and entertainment. Mm-hmm. It's like, how can we go about getting them out of academia, or maybe not getting them out, but getting more diverse opinions within academia?
I think we might have to staff them economically based on, because every single enterprise that panders to social justice crashes. Like you can think about Marvel, you can think about any TV adverts that does it. Every single one of them, huge backlash.
I mean,
the trouble is
it's the only reason they follow it is through the HR.
Hold on. Go ahead, finish, John.
The only reason they've got this hold is through the HR department, through diversity, basically diversity officers in departments. Because I mean, like, which company wouldn't say, "Oh, do you like to be more diverse and inclusive?" Those are nice sounding words. So every company would be like, "Yeah, let's hire somebody," and then they use that as a backdoor to hire the people with their own ideological background, and then they infiltrate any of the hiring structure of any company. That's how they get in. So we need to make the companies realize this is a economic dead end. And if that's dead end, then they got no prospect. Then we staff them from that direction. I think might work.
Mark, you had something to say?
I just meant to say that it's just really obvious they eat themselves alive. You know, it's like that advert from, what was it, Dove, where it was. Every time the woman took her shirt off, there was another woman underneath of a different race, and talking about how we're all the same under the skin. And they had a huge backlash because the black woman came had a white woman inside her or something like that.
It was actually a
was
much longer clip that they've cut down for Twitter because it's
Yes,
only got a few
absolutely.
seconds left. It's originally like about 8 women keep changing, and nobody thought it was racist. It was
Right.
just because that, and even that advert, it wasn't done. It was actually 3 women in there. Whoever retweeted it cut it down to just the black and white. So they literally taken it out of context.
Right. Carlos, you had something to say?
A couple of things. First of all, I think that it worked for Black Panther. The SJW thing totally worked for Black Panther. But I also think that if you're sitting here and you're saying that, damn it, I forgot what I was going to say. Fuck.
I mean, I
All
think
right.
with regards to Black Panther and that sort of thing, I don't think that the increasing divisiveness of sort of like Black Lives Matter politics and that sort of thing in the States has helped things, because like they're emphasizing the otherness instead of the same, instead of the things that make Americans more similar.
Jordan, you had some additional thoughts? The final thought before we move on to our next topic.
So I think that what's his name? Alt-centrist, I think that was you. That was making a point about us starving them out of business in general.
Economically.
Economically. I think that's going to happen naturally. I think that's happening very. I don't think it's something we can force with the businesses. They're going to do it if they think it's a good idea, and they'll face the ramifications. Now, as alternate solution to that problem, I think we're really going to have to. We're going to have to outstaff them in the universities. That's I think where we'd be most successful is getting into universities, staying there, and sitting on these positions so that they can't be filled by radical Marxist, feminist, Black Lives Matter, pan-gendered, what the fuck ever.
Carlos, you remember what you're going to say?
Yeah. What I've noticed, going back to the original point, do you all remember what happened with H&M with the coolest monkey in the jungle thing? Y'all remember what the first thing they did after they apologized was?
No.
Go on.
They hired a diversity officer for their building to
RIP.
make sure that they never do that again. And it wasn't enough.
Well, even the mother came out and said she didn't mind. It's a completely different culture. They didn't exactly look at that and think racism, but if you take it to America or some certain aspects of Africa and such, you will see that. So it's a little bit of an American-centric viewpoint from them, and they should be ashamed of themselves and check their privilege, to be honest.
And not only that, but you have to originally associate Black people with monkeys in order to see it that way. Anybody with any kind of non-racist viewpoint would be like, okay, kids are monkeys, big deal. That's not a big. You would have to be like, okay, Black people are monkeys to actually have that thought.
Well, cut and paste. We're going to edit that, cut it up, and send it to your boss, Carlos. Let's move on to our next topic. Teacher, this is in the UK, so don't worry, Euro guys, we got you. Teacher accused of misgendering child was told by police that she committed a hate crime. Who wants to?
Oh boy.
I'll take this one. I mean, I've already commented on this one so much over the last 2 days. Good grief.
Explain to us what happened.
So basically, a teacher who has described herself as a grammatical purist refused to call a girl who was self-presenting as a girl by male pronouns over the course of 3 months, whilst the parents continually told the teacher to do so. Now, I'm not a massive fan of the way that this teacher has dealt with the situation, with supposedly laughing in the child's face and saying, if you don't want to be called a girl, then don't look like one. However, I think it's this whole issue centers around how much the child is responsible both for their actions and also for their decisions at this point. As far as I'm aware, throughout the whole of this article, there has been absolutely no case by the parents to get a diagnosis by scientists or doctors that the child has gender dysphoria. And it's like children pretend to be things all the time. And all I think that's happened here is that the parents have reinforced that, as soon as the girl went, I'm a boy today, they said, right, well, that must be a transgender child. So we're going to call them a boy every day until she decides to go back. And if it's giving her attention, she's not going to change her stance on that issue because children crave attention. I think in one of the videos I did on this, I made the analogy. It's like if I told my parents I was a fire truck, and my parents said, "Of course you're a fire truck if you believe you're a fire truck." And then I believed I was a fire truck for 3 months.
And you pissed over everything.
And then my teacher said, "You're you're not a fire truck. You're an 11-year-old boy." Then it's like, well, I would be depressed, which is exactly what's happened here, and have to take time off school because my parents are telling me one thing and the school system is telling me another. But I think that children who are just now trying to formulate their view of the world, particularly at that age, just really can't be responsible for that kind of massive decision. I mean, we see that gender hormone replacement therapy and that sort of thing happening to children as young as 15. I dread to think what the backlash is going to be in 20 years when they work out that they were all sterilized and actually it wasn't the best decision for them.
Suicide.
Answer.
Because the majority of children outgrow the gender dysphoria at puberty anyway. So I think all this stuff is too premature to actually reinforces their gender identity before they even hit puberty. I think it's just too rash.
Well,
I think there was I think there was a study that was done that said there is basically an 80%. If your child persists with a gender dysphoria,
86 to 96% of children.
Yeah, 86 to 96%. Grow out of it. Of the others that don't, they are gay, apart from
gay.
A very, very small percentage who are then actually trans. And there's no evidence that transitional behavior actually helps them.
Well, as I always like to say, a trans 3-year-old is like a vegan cat. You know who is making the decisions there.
That's true.
That's a good point. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that the most disturbing thing isn't so much the transgender thing, because you could literally at any point sit there and say that about anything that the kid says. Well, he thinks he's a Lego, so we're going to cover him in plastic now. But I think the more disturbing thing is the idea that they're presenting that a child has the right to decide for itself, such as that. And in my mind, there isn't a huge leap between that and pedophilia. It just really isn't. Because if you're sitting here saying that a child has the right to make a decision to change its gender, then how can you say that it doesn't have the right to decide whether or not it wants to have sex?
Oh, you mean sexual autonomy?
Right. It is a sexual decision in a way. I'd like to first make the clear delineation that I do is I have no problem with a consenting adult making a decision as to regards to their personal lives and bodies.
No, absolutely not.
We have some trans individuals within the Facebook group that are sick of being conflated with progressive politics. The thing I have a problem with is when it's pushed upon children that do not have the ability to make a consensual decision in regards to sexual activity, like Carlos was saying.
Yeah, I mean, you're not old enough to drink, not old enough to get a job, not old enough to do anything. Haven't even been around the world, haven't even hit puberty, but somehow somehow you are old enough to decide what gender identity you want to be. That will have, what's it called? Irreparable for your future. It doesn't make any sense.
Here's a really interesting fact. You as a female, Mary, cannot get your tubes tied unless you have 3 children or are 35. But if you're a 5-year-old who wants to sterilize yourself with hormones, that's okay.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. That you can make an irreparable difference to yourself at that early an age. And while I'm here, I may as well say I don't think it's right to call that hate speech. I mean, if I refer to all of you as what you girls think about that, have I damaged you so much that now I should be hauled off for hate speech or something?
Yes, and you should expect the white person in it.
I know. I apologize.
Calling the police as we speak.
Call up the bias reporting hotline.
I need that number.
We got it.
Well, I'm glad you had that form. Maybe you could use that now for the college.
Call them up.
The patriarchy can't handle a strong female opinion.
We fear the strong vagina. That's what happens.
Yes, as you should.
Now, this person in question, this child at this school, she's claiming she took 2 weeks off of school with anxiety and depression.
Fucking what?
What?
Was that diagnosed by a medical professional?
No, it's
self-identified probably. She didn't even take it off.
Yeah,
I identify as taking 2 weeks off school, but you know.
Should we maybe raid Tumblr and maybe get it taken down, because this sounds like a Tumblr post in real life.
I've actually debated with some people in a SJW Facebook group, which said that the origin of triggering term was about post-traumatic stress disorder. So the reason why, according to SJW, this person would have reacted this way is because it made her or him getting some flash images of horrible stuff that happened before, like warriors. So it seems quite weird, actually.
Mm.
Yeah, you wonder what a child that age would have to flash back on that would bring up that much trauma.
It basically nothing, but I think the
spankings.
Another point
raised by feminists.
The idea that you can walk out of school to be an activist. In what reality is that acceptable?
What do you mean acceptable?
Because all right, so if you example, I saw a Twitter post today where this woman, she was like, my middle school daughter asked me if it would be okay if I walked out of school because to go and protest the current gun control. And she goes, not only is it okay, but I'm going to walk out too to protest with you.
It's like, congratulations, you've just removed yourself from the conversation.
Yeah, but my point is that it just seems like, all in all, especially with the students, it's just an excuse to leave school.
Oh yeah, and it's also the difference that people think that morally grandstanding is the way to get things done. You know, this idea that walking around with placards and yelling at people to deplatform them in any way solves the problems that they're purporting to try to solve.
Or that activism is a job. Like that it's acceptable to go to college to become an activist. It's one of the things that Jordan always talks about is that professional activism is cancer. It literally is. You're just having a career and upsetting people and being anti something.
Right. So the big thing I'm reading about this this whole article here is that under an Equality Act from 2010, it's unlawful for schools to treat pupils less favorably because of gender reassignment. Here's the problem, though. They consider gender reassignment any point in which you claim your gender is different than what it is. So it's not really reassignment in any kind of medical term. Now, I'm wondering if the law, I'd have to look it up, if the law is that vague the whole way through, because that's kind of frightening.
The one in Canada is that vague. It literally comes down to what clothing you're wearing.
The difficulty with the UK law as well is that gender and sex have been synonymous in a lot of our law for a long, long time. So the difficulty is that things that would have typically referred to biological sex now are being sort of swung around as referring to the new construct of gender.
Yeah. You know, like they always, I think it's a disingenuous sleight of hand, because there has never been, because like even Canada, remember they've changed it so you can have like unspecified gender on your ID card and stuff. I'm Canadian as well. On my passport, nothing ever on my birth certificate, nothing ever said gender. It's always sex. But they are using gender as sex to usurp the definition by saying, well, because gender is a social construct, now you can identify as anything or for your sex on your documents. So they're using it interchangeably or a completely different thing, whatever suits the argument at the time. It's a sleight of hand.
I wonder, this kid in question too, the teacher said something about in the article, you're presenting yourself as a girl, but you're saying you're a boy. So, you know, if you're in a dress and you have a bow and your long hair and you say, but you have to call me he, you know, I don't know if that's the case, or I'm not that familiar with the story.
That isn't a natural thought. Like, my biggest problem with all of the trans children is that they're being abused by their parents. It's not about whether or not the kid at some point was like, hey, you know what, I'm a little girl. It's that the mother or the father or whoever sit there and said, you know what would be really great if I had a trans kid.
Are you claiming that certain parents would see it as sort of a status symbol in terms of
Well, it's
showing
like
themselves as
it's like how it used to be if you had a gay kid, wasn't it? It was like, I'm so accepting of the fact that my child is gay, and like some of them I know just do it for the attention, and they come out as being straight, and also I noticed it quite heavily. I mean, I'm involved in the Christian community, which is quite surprising for a liberalist, but
I am too.
and but basically we have a number of Christians, and when they're children, they'll try and push anything to get the attention from their parents, including faking religious experience. And I mean, it happened to my brother, and he came out eventually when he was 16. It was like, no, I lied about the whole thing, like for 8 years, about all this stuff that I was seeing or doing or believing. And it's just the same with kids. They'll do that for their parents' attention and affection.
Well, there's studies from, I forgot which university, I'm thinking Michigan, it may have been another, I can look it up. They did a study where they would have a child in a room and 2 adults. One adult would be in the room with the child playing and being friendly. Then an adult would come in an angry fashion, and the child would change their behavior based on what the adult would do. So a lot of the time, their conclusion in the abstract was that children are plastic. They will conform their behavior towards what their guardians want. And it's extremely dangerous to, even unintentionally, manipulate a child. I'm not saying these parents all have a insidious or malevolent nature about them, but it's almost what I would term toxic altruism.
Actually, I've seen another case. I can't remember a documentary I saw that there was a kid that was diagnosed as transgender. Oh, that's the BBC one that got banned from was it CB? Is it CBC or something in Canada?
Yeah,
that one. Basically, the kid was diagnosed as transgender, but it was because their parents split up, and I think I can't remember which one it was. I think it might have been he thought if he was more of a girl, daddy would love him or somewhere along those lines. So that's how they got how they became transgender. It wasn't actually because the child actually wanted to be transgender. It was before the affection of the father who's away now, kind of thing. It's kind of stems from that. So that is actually apparently it's quite common as well.
One of the things that I want to point out is the reason that Owen Benjamin was dropped from his label is because he had an actual friend who did what we're talking about. He actually turned his child, his 3-year-old, trans. And the problem is that if you can tell me that there is a bunch of parents out there who have split up from their whatever dads or moms or whatever, and who badmouth their other parts constantly, to where the child hates their father or their mother or whatever, you cannot tell me that those same exact type of people wouldn't turn their kids trans instead of having a gay kid, which is
That's true.
Well, you know, it's funny that you bring this up. We did an interview, or I held an interview here on the YouTube channel with Dr. Michael Rechtenwald, and he made the argument. Now, I'm going to take the Aristotle view here, and an intelligent person can entertain an idea without necessarily believing it. That's my caveat for this, what I'm going to say next. He took the argument that the trans phenomena amongst children is essentially a continuation of progressive eugenics policies in an effort to weed out the quote-unquote gay gene from the gene pool. Now,
that's a woke opinion.
Yeah. What do you think of that, Brendan?
Also, sorry, could you say that again? They were trying to weed out the gay gene.
Yes, he made the argument that the current trans phenomenon amongst children before puberty, making them effectively sterile in a lot of cases, is a continuation of progressive eugenics policy to weed out the gay gene from the gene pool. That was his argument. What do you say to that?
Oy vey, fucking hell. All right. If there's a gay gene, and as far as I'm aware, there are genes that do impact your sexual orientation, then how would you weed it out? Because if there's a gay kid, well, obviously he's born from parents who are not gay, which means one of them must have had the gene to begin with. So,
well, the parents
there's always going to be carriers of the gene.
Well, they wouldn't, because they'd make the child say that they were trans and then sterilize them.
But his siblings don't carry that gene.
The point is, though, if they have this gay gene, then it is a requirement that one of their parents must have had it too. So any other sibling and any other relatives would have it, and this will go back generations, which essentially means everyone's going to have it, but it just depends on whether or not it's active.
It could be education, for the record.
Just
So-
to go back to the article, which is talking about the way that the teachers are being treated in response to all this stuff as well. At the bottom of the article, it talks about a guy called Joshua Sutcliffe who came up sort of a little bit earlier in the month. He says he was investigated after he said, "Well done, girls," to a group that included a student who identified as a boy. And it's like, well, he's clearly referring to the majority gender in the group anyway, in the same way as you might say to a class, you know, "Well done, guys," if it's primarily guys. And it's just like, how far does this legislation go? Is it so that you'll have a speaker who goes onto a stage and then, you know, and it's a primarily female audience, and he addresses the women, and one of the people who looks like a woman identifies as wormkin, or, you know, he says, "Well done, people," and there's a wormkin or a furry there or something who uses different pronouns, and you go, "Well, I don't identify as people." It's like, well, how far does this go though, before we start suing people?
At what point do we just get to say, "Fuck you, I'm calling you this"?
Yeah.
Well, of course, we can just call everyone people kind instead of man.
I was going to
What
say
if they
God,
don't
the man
identify as people? They could identify as a cat, then you're
I
screwed
identify
anyway.
as a house, and if you don't
Ent-
enter, you're discriminating.
Entity kind.
I mean, if you talk about the way that we refer to people, it's a social negotiation. The way that you identify is only half of the sort of the equation. The other half is the way that I identify you, and there needs to be a little bit of interplay there and a mutual understanding. But it basically means that I need to be able to distinguish you from other people in my memory.
It's an observation.
It's an observation, and if you present a certain way, that's the easiest way to categorize.
So,
yeah, sorry.
So the thing that I have a problem with, and I've noticed this as a trend over the last 30 years, but it seems like child stuff tends to trickle down from societal stuff. So whenever we had the gay acceptance movement, gay marriage movement, then all of a sudden we had a bunch of gay kids come out, right? Now that we have the trans acceptance movement, we have a bunch of trans kids coming out. Recently, I saw a thing where somebody was like, "I'm going to turn myself into an elf." So since we have, you know, wormkins, like somebody said earlier, we have elfkins, we have all these people who think that you can literally change your species, then I don't understand how much longer it's going to be before some parent decides that they're going to turn their kid into an elf.
I mean, it sounds stupid, but yeah, it might be right.
I think a lot of the times, though, there are genuine cases when you bring up the like gay children, trans children. There are genuine cases, of course.
There are, but they
And-
don't need to be diluted by this sort of toxic idea that more than a tiny percentage of the population is that.
Right.
But there is also a link between the nurture aspect of stuff and gayness. Like,
I mean,
you
sorry.
can find a direct link between a child being molested as a child and the likelihood that it's going to end up being gay as an adult.
I have no issue whatsoever with these people going out and getting people scientifically tested by medical professionals to make sure that they're actually being diagnosed with these conditions, or that's what it is. I have an issue with it sort of being the social structure that the parents are like, well, because identity is completely fluid, I can just identify my child as whatever, and as long as they agree with that, then that's what they are.
Well, as a final, go ahead, Mary.
I was going to say, I wonder if it's a type of like Munchausen's by proxy, that you get all the attention to the parent because the kid has this, you know, problem, or if you want to, not necessarily problem, but, you know, a syndrome.
Something interesting about the kid that's by proxy
Right.
about them.
Yes.
Instead of little Billy coming home with a trophy from T-ball, he's coming home with a new identity. And we have to celebrate that identity. Does anyone have any final thoughts on this piece before we move on?
No, I'm just eating delicious chicken.
Are we good?
I'm good. We can move on.
What up, Bears?
Okay, so now moving on to another part of the world, or should I say a completely separate planet, it's Hollywood. So a bunch of Hollywood actors, actresses, mostly B-list, like it says Alyssa Milano here. I mean, what was the last thing she was in? They're
Charmed.
They're looking to bring down Amazon. They want Amazon to drop the NRA channel, because if there's anything you can do for those victims of shootings, it's dropping the NRA channel from Amazon TV, right?
Right.
Literally the dumbest thing ever.
Right. So, I mean, what's wrong with Hollywood? What is going on with them?
Well, one thing I
It's
noticed
just been
on the
its own
screen right
microcosm
there.
anyway.
Go ahead,
I
Mary.
noticed on the screen there, it's SVU, people from Law and Order SVU, which promotes, I love the show, but it's, sex crimes and shootings and all sorts of things. And they're like, we shouldn't have this evil gun show on Amazon. But yet, we're one of those that you might question, does that type of entertainment lead people to think violence is, normal? So
Right.
that jumped out at me.
Wait a second. You're telling me that the same people who got super butthurt that President Trump said that violent video games may be a correlation to these violent acts, they're saying that the NRA channel should be shut down for the exact fucking same reason?
Right. Well, they say that the NRA channel essentially makes money from it. They want to cut off their funding, is more what they want to do. Hit them in the wallet so they can stop funding what they do. And
It's not principled, it's pragmatic, basically.
is anyone here a member of the NRA?
No, but I might be in the future.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it just because of all this.
There's no point in me. I can't have guns.
I would think that. Oh, thank God. I mean, you are brown. So essentially,
Wow.
If you don't think I get a comment like that about once an hour, then
it's all love here. It's all love. Dude, even this whole talk about banning assault rifles, quote unquote, makes me want to go and get one immediately. So I think they have a counterintuitive effect.
Also, I have this really fucking huge problem with the idea that 4 police officers couldn't take on one person with the AR-15. I think that's moronic, because if you're talking about in close quarters with a fucking police handgun, I would much rather have the police handgun than the fucking rifle. That's stupid.
I agree.
You could literally, you have more movement. It's retarded that they didn't go in there.
Although this last school shooting, it's like they've noticed a lot of problems with the FBI, and maybe Donald Trump was correct when he said maybe if the FBI wasn't investigating Russia and instead doing their jobs, because they were called with a lot of tips about this particular student in advance. And the guy used his real name.
20 phone calls.
All right, well, say that again, Brandon. What's up?
I'm pretty sure the number is from September 2016. There were at least 20 phone calls made about Nicholas Cruz when I think there's some of the ones where he was cutting himself, holding guns to people's heads, drinking gasoline to kill himself.
Jesus.
This is what I've heard.
And it didn't even make it into the background database that he would, if didn't even flag anything when he went to buy a gun. Was this odd thing with that?
The question is this a failure of America's laws which would prevent anyone listed on the FBI's database, or is it a failure of the government not getting Nicholas Cruz into a database that would prevent him buying a gun under the laws?
I would say it's just like the church shooting that happened in Texas. That individual was supposed to be and was on a list from the Air Force for domestic violence. In America, if you commit domestic violence, you're not allowed to purchase a firearm. Well, he did purchase a firearm despite being on that block list. So both issues, both incidences, I'd say yes, the government must. They have to do their jobs.
Yeah.
I would also point out the fact that this is 100% on the local police there, because if you listen to that to this thing I heard on Ben Shapiro yesterday, one of the calls, it was the transcript. She literally laid out that the kid was mentally unstable. His mom just died, which means he doesn't have any connection to the world, which means he's more likely to kill a bunch of people. And on top of it, you have that he got a bunch of money and he bought a bunch of guns. Now, I don't understand how after that statement, because it's horrific hearing it, but I don't understand how nobody took it seriously after that point with as many calls on him as there were.
Right. On our Facebook group, in fact, there is a member who grew up with Nicholas Cruz, and apparently his father died when he was very young. His mother died about 3 months ago. He was isolated very much unliked and all that. There's an interesting article, if you look it up. I would Google teacher brilliant idea towards students. And basically what she does, and she's done this every Friday since Columbine, is she gets all the students to fill out a form, essentially asking them, who would you like to sit next to starting Monday for the week? And she'll start noticing patterns within that. Which student is being isolated? Essentially, she's looking for isolation because she believes all violence, almost all violence, comes from isolation. And that's something I feel is common sense that we can do in our schools that won't take up too much time, and will give us insight into which students we should really watch out for and attempt to alleviate their isolation.
Has anybody seen the video from Warren Farrell on mass shooters?
No.
It goes into the lack of a male figure in every single mass shooter's lives. It's 100% correlation at the moment. Where they were either the parents left, the father left at a young age, or died. So it's just a lack of positive male role models in today's society. Personally, in my mind, that these kids aren't being looked after. I mean, it's 51% now, I think, in the US of families of children are raised by a single parent.
Well, the problem with that statistic is it only includes people who have gotten officially married. So there is slightly, it wouldn't correlate exactly 1-to-1 with single parent households. I'm sure there's other numbers according to that. Maybe Theo has a word on those numbers.
Oh, his mic's busted as far as I'm aware, so I don't know if he'll be talking.
Sorry, Theo. I mean, honestly, there's a difference between cultures, and not to talk too much about guns, because to stay on the topic of Hollywood, you know what? Let's go back to the topic of Hollywood. What is it about celebrities that makes them think they can just be experts on everything? It just feels that way.
They don't live in the real world. That's the main issue. They're so completely disconnected from reality that they live in their own echo chambers.
I think one of the biggest problems is too many people value their input, and too many people. All right, so this is a good point to segue over to something that needs to be talked about, which is them damn kids. And I think the problem with the kids is the fact that, first of all, they've already hit the top of the social justice hierarchy. They're extreme victims. Okay. So being extreme victims, they automatically have the voice of every social justice warrior out there. On top of that, they're victims who have realized that their victim status will literally make them famous for as long as they can continue to ride it. Especially the David Hogg kid. That kid is obnoxious. I mean, to say that, I mean, that's the nicest way to put it. To sit there and say that the entire Florida tourist industry should be hurt because he says that they should go to Puerto Rico instead is insane to me. I don't even understand how he managed to survive that, being from Florida. I think that statement alone cost the state of Florida probably at least $500,000.
Wow. Say $500,000?
Yeah, easily $500,000. Just the statement, because of the fact that there's going to be at least one or two people who are like, I'm not going to Florida this year, but he's right. I'm going to go to Puerto Rico or Canada or Colorado. Right. Yeah.
Why is it every election we see celebrities say they're leaving the country no matter which candidate on either side, and none of them really leave? I think Miley Cyrus was the only one that left.
Did she?
Where did she go though? Was it Canada or Mexico? Because I'm pretty sure if she was going to go somewhere, it wouldn't be south.
I would. She went to Europe, I believe.
Oh no.
Well, all you Europeans enjoyed dealing with Miley Cyrus.
Right.
Hashtag pray for Miley. Hopefully she doesn't get acid attacked.
Yeah.
I think she prefers to be called Hannah.
That's funny.
She identifies as Hannah, but only on the weekends.
I don't know if you guys have seen this, but did you see the celebrities in favor of Brexit that recently came out?
There's a celebrity in favor of Brexit?
Yeah, Michael Caine. I think Michael Caine was one of them.
Good.
They're all old UK actors.
Yeah, I did see this, and like it was like three of the four living members of Monty Python were in favor of Brexit.
Nice.
Yeah.
Eric Idle? Woohoo!
Monty Python.
One of the things that I think is really interesting about the world we live in right now is that if you're, pro anything or whatever, you're going to have at least a shit ton of people who are going to come out the woodwork in order to, like, especially if you're on Twitter. Let's say you do anything on Twitter and the social justice warriors or the alt-right doesn't like it, then you're going to end up with 1,000 or so retweets and all this other hate spewed at you. And what bugs me is the fact that it really is starting to affect social policy, because that there would be more people who would be pro-Brexit if it wasn't for the fact that being that way or being pro-Trump or whatever causes such a retarded reaction in people.
I just saw an academics with Brains for Brexit. I think I posted it to the group where there's a bunch of academics who are putting their names on a list as being pro-Brexit. So I thought that was interesting to counter the thing of, people who voted leave are just too stupid to know what they need or something like that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that's always the tactic that the left uses and any time you go against them, is that if you don't agree with us, then you must be stupid. Otherwise, you must be just off the turnip cart, and you voted the way you did because some person lied to you, and you're just too stupid to understand it.
Hey, what are UK celebrities like? That goes to any of you English chaps.
Oh, fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Honestly, Russell Brand
he is awful.
Russell Brand is something else, but he's an anarchist. He's an anarchist with no solutions. It's like it's incredibly easy. I think this is what's driving political opinion left in the UK. Is we have this right-wing government that's doing a terrible job. That is really, really, really easy to critique. And then what's happening is all the center figures and the left figures are pointing out all the issues, but our national memory is so short that obviously we're not remembering the last century, that all the flaws with the socialist utopia aren't being sort of pointed out because it's a utopia, and so they're extolling all the values of it. So most of the UK celebrities are, if they work in Hollywood, then they tend to be very left-leaning, but other than that, most of them just keep their noses out of it for the sake of their own careers, to be honest.
That's good.
I also think that you have the same problem that you have if, like, let's say you're really into wrestling. What's really funny about being into pro wrestling for long enough, you'll hear them lie to you in order to promote a thing. So it'll be like, this is the first time that this person has ever fought this person. It's going to be the biggest match ever, And so you get a lot of the same things out of Hollywood. It'd be like, this is the hugest mass shooting of all time. Or there's been 35 school shootings in this year alone. Not to mention most of them were just guns being fired off in school zones. It's one of those things to where if you go long enough and you have a dumb enough population, you can tell them anything and they'll believe you because of the fact they don't want to look it up.
I'm wondering if Bollywood has the same problem. Like they have some kind of Indian celebrities running around talking about how gender is on a spectrum and like
I think this is valid research that needs to be done.
Yeah,
we need to figure out what the demographics of Bollywood are on these.
Nation, get on it. Get on it.
I have to do a lot of work on that one.
Yeah, I want to see Bollywood, the awards ceremony, have someone step up and say, #Me Too. Oh, by the way, there's a after party at Harvey Weinstein's house. Like, I'll bring all you young actresses around. He's going to give you an audition. Wink.
Oh my.
There is
On
something
the casting couch.
there is something gross about that there is no reality in their minds where a woman pursued Harvey Weinstein for a role. It was always Harvey Weinstein being Jabba the Hutt, chaining up women and stuff like that. But if I would say probably 75 to 80% of the women that Harvey Weinstein got with were there willingly and did it because of the fact that they wanted some kind of role.
Well, we're coming up on the hour, well, on the quarter hour when we started. So I'm just going to read a couple of comments in the live chat that aren't from utopian LARPers. From Angus Irwin, the kids being exploited into craptivism on the gun issue is pathetic. Thoughts?
I mean, I think it's something that's really close to a lot of the kids' hearts, particularly if they were actually there. It's really easy to be sort of hypersensitized to the issue. But I disagree. I think that most people can agree on the issues. I don't think people agree on the solutions, though, and that's where the trouble comes in.
I would say that it's a issue of who gets pushed in the media these days. If you look over the last 15, 20 years, the people who have been promoted the most are activists. The people who, like that white dude, what is his name? Sean King.
White dude.
Yeah, Sean King and Del Rey and all of these other female, like Mattress Girl, all of those people have been glamorized at some point, and they've actually made a lot of money off of being activists, just by exploiting some kind of the horrible thing that happened to them. I mean, Sean King.
Oh, I mean, it's a $2 billion industry.
But if you look in the 80s, everybody wanted to be Michael Jordan. Now everybody wants to be an activist. And if you look at these kids, them kids knew exactly what they were going to do from the second that guy started shooting. I don't think that, if you look at that one girl with the bald hair, she was an activist before the guns even went off. It's just they were looking for an example to promote themselves. And I know that sounds really disgusting, but it's the way that reality works. I mean, I don't understand how you could sit there and say that you're a trauma victim if every picture you take, you're smiling. I've been shot at before, and I can't imagine smiling about being shot at.
Yeah.
I have a problem anytime I see a child at any kind of protest or rally and stuff. My parents made it a point to keep me away from their political viewpoints. And my parents were working class. My mother was a waitress. My father was a dock worker. And essentially, they wanted all of us kids, and there was 5 of us, to come up with our own thoughts, to investigate our own thoughts and beliefs. And, they challenge us in that way.
Oh, Dan, can I quickly ask, did you all end up with the same political viewpoint because you had the same
Or end
genetic?
up Nazis?
No, actually, man, it runs the gamut. My oldest brother is extremely libertarian. My youngest sister is very far left, and it runs in between that spectrum. Like I consider myself a little more center.
So you have a sister?
Oh, she's a lesbian.
No.
I can't.
Is it now to say that I've dated a lesbian before? It was.
God damn it!
I'm not even kidding. That's a story for another time.
I can't see the chat. Do we have saltines in there?
Oh, a few.
Here's the deal with the whole high school
I've-
students
hold on,
talking. Hold on one second. Here's the deal with the whole high school students thing, and I saw a meme, so I'm going to repeat a meme. Why are we listening to kids who only 2 weeks ago had to be told not to eat laundry detergent?
Dude,
their
like,
opinion
oh
is
my god!
on
the
national
first time I-
policy.
Stealing my meme. I shared that.
The first time I saw that meme, I was
Now-
like, that is
now
the
I want to
best
vote.
hot take ever.
So accurate.
So
That's-
here,
I mean,
to all you alt-writers in the chat. Why?
Okay, that's enough. Enough.
I don't
Stop.
want to say something real quick.
Oh, you can go fucking talk to them on their LARPing channel.
No,
Yeah.
I want to say. I
I don't
wanna-
care, Carlos.
Damn you.
All right, so we're gonna
Where do I see the chat? I haven't seen it.
it's
You
on
have to open
YouTube.
the.
Oh, it's on YouTube.
You gotta pull up YouTube.
Open another window and then turn off sound. This is what
Yep.
you do.
Gotcha.
No, I put it on my phone, so I've been.
All right, guys, we're coming up on the quarter hour. I do have to get running, and as I'm sure some of you do.
Oh, yeah, it's like almost midnight here. I need to sleep.
Right. So I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank all you guys for coming on in, and this was very orderly, very cool. And you know what? Friday, we're having a big gun debate. I think it's going to be 4 p.m. Eastern time, which a UK guy, tell me, what is that time in the UK? 4 p.m.
Eastern, 4 p.m. will be 8 p.m.
5, yeah?
Plus, yeah, so it's 9 p.m. UK time.
I thought it was 4 hours. Okay.
No, it's 5 hours.
Is it -5? Are you -5? EST's GMT -5, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay,
plus
then
5 hours.
then, yeah.
So on Friday, we're going to have a chat. It's going to be 9 p.m. UK time. We're going to have someone from Denmark, someone from the UK, someone from Texas. That'd be Mr. Carlos there. Get ready. And someone from, where was our other country? Oh, New Zealand. So it's going to be a worldwide debate on gun control, and we hope you join us Friday, and that's 4 p.m. Eastern time. Figure it out on your own. Get an app. I don't care what you do. Again, thanks for joining us, and check out the Liberalists.net, our new little splash page where you can check out all of our other social media platforms. And everyone say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Instagram.
Chaos.